How's it going, laser Bruce up? I'll be Sixkilla and welcome back to Choices That Matter, and the sun went out. It is story time. Once again, settle in everybody for half an hour of listening to me ramble on and talk about crazy shit that's happening. Because crazy shit is happening all the time. Now we're in Japan. We've only just gotten to Japan. I don't know what's going to happen next. We're trying to get into where the Aetherites base is in Japan. Not going very well so far. Anyway. Oh yes, that's right, and we got drugged in our tea. And now we just woke up from being drugged. Loudly threaten those listening, let's do that. Does Shihori Kanjia know that you're using footage of her? Of her films in your windows, I asked? Because if you don't let us go, she'll soon find out. I've sent her a message with a timer. What time is it now, incidentally? I've been unconscious. Moments after I began talking, the door opened to reveal the secretary from number 5's front desk. Excellent, she said. You're awake. Where's Etienne? I asked. Waiting for you, she said, producing a pistol and carefully arranging her blood-red fingernails so they didn't get in the way of her finger on the trigger. Shall we? Two others led the way and the secretary followed me down a hall and into another boardroom, this one still containing its furniture. Etienne was there, tied to a chair, with his hands bound together in front of him. Are you okay? He said to me. Have they done anything to you? I just woke up and came here. What about you? They drew some blood, he said. Not exactly torture, although they didn't give me a jelly bean. What do you want his blood for? I asked. The secretary shrugged and motioned for her companions to tie me up like Etienne. She made herself comfortable across the table from us and put down the gun and double-checked her fingernail polish hadn't lost any of its gloss. You're clearly not here to study the moon, she said, but you obviously know what we are, so I'll give you another chance to join us. I'm listening, I said cautiously. The door opened before she replied, and another pair of Japanese men cut Etienne loose and escorted him from the room. What are you doing? I said. Where are you taking him? One turned back to the doorway. Upstairs. Please, I said to the secretary, if you're that unhappy about our presence, we'll just go somewhere else and not bother you again. She tapped her fingernails on the table in a syncopated rhythm. What the hell is syncopated? We both know that that's not going to happen. Alright, I said, so how can Etienne and I get you into your good books? Do you want money? International contacts? Kitchen stuff? Knowledge, of course. Is there anything in that head of yours worth keeping? Oh, absolutely. But I don't want to share my research with you. She laughed. Alright then, some basic questions to check you're not a complete moron. Fine, I said, wriggling in my bonds in order to tap Moti's screen. How far away is the sun? When it's here, and has that distance changed lately? Just under 150 million kilometers, I answered, silently thanking Moti, and impressed at the automatic selection of metric units. And no, the moon's orbit around Earth has grown more elliptical, but the Earth's orbit around the sun is unchanged. Okay, she said neutrally, so you're studying the sun outage event, I assume. Of course. How long has the sun gone during the second incident? 19 hours, 45 minutes and 34 seconds, I said, rounding to the nearest second. Her face blanked out as she began to believe she'd made an error of judgment. She asked me a few more mathematical formulas, then nodded sharply to her goons, who untied me. Apparently I'd passed the test. My Year 10 science teacher would be so pleased, except for the cheating part, of course. You may move freely around the facility, she said. The matron will meet you personally and explain everything else you need to know. Where's Etienne? Our security is necessary, she said, putting the gun away. I have more reason than most to keep you alive and safe. Go upstairs and you'll find everything you need, including your friend. She returned my things, and I showed her a picture of Victor Santiago on my phone. Her lip curled. I'm familiar with Mr. Santiago, and with the 100th Day group, she said. Thank you for sharing your information all the same. Let's go find Etienne first. I hurried down the hall past seemingly endless conference rooms and took the fire stairs rather than the elevator. The one window I saw had an odd sheen to the glass. I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious. After 3 flights, I was breathing hard, my heart pounding with a mixture of exertion and worry. When I spotted a sign saying Matron's Office, I stopped climbing and instead moved to explore that floor. It felt like I'd woken inside a video game, where the same dull corridor was repeated over and over. Then I saw something, a rough drawing of a cog on a closed door. It was hard to tell from a pencil outline, but it looked like the cog was stylized to look wooden. Call Etienne's phone? I glanced around, checking no one was nearby. The hall appeared deserted, an endless line of grey carpet lit by fluorescent tiles in the ceiling. I called Etienne's number and heard it ringing through the door at once. He was inside. "Hello," he said. He sounded completely normal. "Are you alright?" I whispered. "Where are you?" "I'm fine and I'm upstairs," he said. "Has the dragon lady let you into the castle yet?" "Is that meant to be a duress code?" He laughed. "No, everyone calls her the dragon around here." "In that case, would you like to open the door?" "Oh," he said, and the door opened. The room was empty. It was the size of an average living room, with a circle of wooden chairs and several dusty bunks lining along the wall. "As far as I can tell, there's nothing here," said Etienne, "just like every other room in a row, except for the drawing on the door." He seems to have forgotten how we were brought inside the building. My body was still buzzing with adrenaline. "What do they want with your blood?" "They said relatives of geniuses are allowed in," he said. "They also told me I didn't need a full DNA test because I may be negative, which would be reassuring, except how do they know that? Who's been sharing my medical data? And what else do they know about me?" "Maybe your dad had something to do with it." I felt my chest tightening at the thought of the eccentric professor. He'd want you to have shelter. "Maybe," he said slowly, though he still looked uneasy. "I assume the Etherites were involved. Gathering personal information without permission seems like classic secret society fare." He let it go and gestured generally around us. "Once this place gets crowded," he continued, "I imagine they'll tighten their entry policy. For now, it seems to be down to the dragon lady at the desk. She's fierce, but apparently if someone knows what this place is, it's enough for her. After a bit of light kidnapping, of course." I peered through the screen over the window. The window began at my chin height and extended upward beyond the ceiling. It was a strange effect. "Does this have a video of a fake office playing in it too?" Etienne shook his head. "Most of the videos are installed in storage rooms, so no one breaks them by mistake. They move around a little sometimes too." "How do you know that?" I asked. "The matron told me. Have you seen it yet?" "No, I was looking for you." He nodded. "I recommend you put it off. In my experience, people are more lenient to rule breakers when they haven't been told the rules yet. She said the Etherites are 2 floors up. Shall we find them?" "Good idea." We went up to the Etherites' floor and saw many more people from a range of countries. The floor wasn't filled with boardrooms or living quarters, but a variety of different laboratories. We caught glimpses of a Caucasian woman in a lab coat carefully measuring chemicals, several Japanese people checking over meteorological equipment, and others scrawling on whiteboards, debating theories and scowling at their computers. The vast majority were simply working on computers, although I definitely saw a Tetris game among them. Like the other floors, it was set out as an enormous circle with rooms on either side of the primary hallway. When we'd almost completed a full circuit of the building, Etienne finally spotted a familiar face. "Dr. Wong," he said, "it's good to see you looking so well again." Dr. Wong stared at the sight of us and then hurried over. "You made it. I was afraid the dragon at the front desk would chase you off." Etienne and I exchanged glances. "We're here now," I said, producing Sol's diary. "Does anyone have the key to open this?" His eyes widened and he touched the diary with one finger, as if it was the crown jewels. "Is that what I think it is?" "It is." "If you give it to me, every one of us will devote ourselves to revealing and interpreting its secrets." Etienne stiffened. "You know I can't give it up," I said. "Sol was my employee when he wrote this diary and contains all the conclusions he reached while I paid him. The diary is mine." Dr. Wong's face fell and his muscles tensed, as if he would snatch the diary from my hands. I took a step back. "If you change your mind, come and see me," he said. "I'm in room 30 on the 8th floor. The rest of the Etherites are nearby. Those of us that survived the recent attacks, that is. Don't show the diary to anyone else. Secrets are like prison cigarettes around here." "I'll keep that in mind," I said cautiously. Etienne and I found a deserted lounge and had Moti check for listening devices. "I wonder what I've gotten you into," said Etienne ruefully. "This is a very interesting place." "Well," I said, enjoying Moti's optimism as always. "With so many brilliant researchers in one place, someone must know something useful." "In theory, yes," said Etienne. "I get the feeling it may be more difficult to get out than it was to get in." I made a face. "We'll deal with that when we have to. Or do you want to escape now, before they get their claws into us properly?" "No," he said, "I'm in. Better these wackos than the 100th day cult." When you put it like that, it's an easy choice. "Are we going to explore?" "Yes, Moti, we are." "Let's start on the roof and work our way down." Etienne and I took the lift as high as we could, which was clearly not as high as the lift could go. We reached the 40th floor, or 45th. Struck with inspiration, I asked Moti, "Did you record the number of floors visible from outside the building?" Yes, teacher. Despite the buttons indicated 45 floors, there are 40 floors visible from the outside. I don't think the lift is wrong, I said. I think there's more to this building than meets the eye. We got out on the 40th floor. Another floor concerned mainly with sleeping quarters, although these were considerably more pleasant than the ones we'd seen, and searched for another way to go higher. Our best bet was the stairs, since there was a clearly marked door on the higher levels with a straightforward keypad. I examined it closely and observed that 4 of the numbers were slightly dulled from usage, 3, 5, 8, and O. The O was more smudged than the rest. I told the others, hoping for inspiration. If the code is 4 digits long, then there are just 24 possible combinations. Shall I list them? It could be more than 4 digits, but let's give it a shot. Start with codes that begin with O and then codes ending in O. Yes, teacher. After a few attempts, we hit the right code and opened the door to more stairs. Before we went inside, Etienne pointed out a sliding concrete panel beside the door. Someone somewhere had a panic button to hide this door, and the keypad with it. They must have a similar system for the lifts, I said. So the top 5 floors are a kind of panic room in case the building is breached. Trickery instead of force, Etienne said. I like it. We made it all the way up to the flat roof of the building, where there was a large kitchen garden with an enormous blue-grey spire at the centre. Etienne flicked the spire with a fingernail. This explains the lightning strike in mid-air, but it doesn't explain how they hid the top 5 floors. I know how they do it, I said, laughing at the simplicity of it. The windows don't match the floors. They're all either false windows or screened with videos. Each floor's windows are just a bit taller than they should be. Etienne gave a low whistle. I admire the paranoia of whoever built this place. I voiced neutrally. Just one problem. Oh, he said. The builders, I said, and engineers and electricians and gardeners, I strongly doubt that everyone involved in a project this size also wanted to live in it. So they're all out there knowing exactly what they built. The human factor is always the greatest flaw in any plan. I couldn't agree more, said an unfamiliar voice. Etienne and I spun around to see a man settling down an enormous telescope to confront us. Who are you and what are you doing here? I'll tell the truth for this guy. I'm a private investigator funding research into the sun outage incident, I said. Funding, he said, stiffening like a hound on a fox hunt. I shrugged. Won't I think it's worthwhile? Tell me everything you know, the man with the telescope demanded. No, wait, you look exhausted. Shall I arrange rooms for you up here? You can all bask in reflected glory when we solve this wretched sun issue once and for all. That sounds good. We were shown into a room that wasn't much smaller than a 2-bedroom hotel suite. Unfortunately, I was missing real windows and sunshine already. The rule list blue tacked onto the back of the door indicated that we needed to present our passes at every meal. Dinner time was fast approaching. At Etienne's suggestion, I decided to meet the matron. It wouldn't be a good idea to put it off any longer. The matron was a steely-eyed woman whose authority made her seem older than me, although when I looked at her smooth skin and black hair, I revised my estimate of her age to somewhere in her 20s. I explained who I was truthfully, and she simply looked at me with an unblinking stare until I began to babble. I caught myself and stopped talking, realizing she was making me uncomfortable on purpose. She smiled wolfishly and recited a rule and list including half a dozen areas where a probationary case, such as myself, was not allowed. The forbidden areas included any laboratory or occupied sleeping quarters where I had not been specifically invited, and the same conditions on all floors below ground level and all floors above the 40th, including the roof. Are we clear? She said. Yes, matron. She signed a probationary pass card and gave it to me. I could disable it from here, or add privileges as you earn them. I nodded, feeling like a schoolchild at the principal's office, and closed the door behind me on the way out. Etienne gave me a rueful smile. Beautiful, isn't she? And fierce. She's quite something. Something, I said. Yes. If she wasn't so terrifying, I'd definitely have a crush on her, he said. I admitted she was stunning, in more ways than one, although I'd been too nervous to appreciate it fully at the time. Fortunately, the next place for us to investigate was the dining hall. Go together to the main dining hall. Etienne and I shared a large Japanese-style pizza. He saw me making a face and shook his head. You need to educate your palate, he said. This has a delicious and subtle blend of flavours. If only one of them was mozzarella, I said, pushing away my plate. I've had enough excitement for today, so I'll try something else Japanese tomorrow. I spotted a Peruvian-looking woman wearing a shirt with what looked like Spanish on it. I wondered if she was familiar with the 100th Day group. If she was, I was glad she'd made it out. She didn't speak to anyone over her meal, and she left alone. Well, let's not sneak her, let's just go talk to her. I hurried up to the woman and stopped in front of her, feeling like a fool. Are you from South America? I asked. It's just, I was in Cusco and I saw the temple and it was so interesting. She smiled gently at my babbling. Cusco is my home. I'm glad you liked it, and I'm glad you spoke to me. My name is Dr. Carmen Wales. I'm a psychiatrist. She laughed at my expression. Most of the population here studies hard data, she said. Numbers and measurements and the density of the earth or heat of the sun. It's funny how the human brain is so much more complicated than the rest of the universe put together. You misunderstand me, I said. I know your name. We spoke on the phone back in Cusco. Your name was on a list of people targeted by Victor Santiago. You're the person who called me, she said, looking like she'd seen a ghost. You saved my life. Really, I said? She nodded. You made me so paranoid I didn't trust anyone anymore, which turned out to be a good choice when an interviewee tried to blow up my office. Oh, I said. I'm glad you're alright, and I'm sorry about your office. In any case, I'm glad to have met you, she said. What's your field? I'm an investigator, I said, which I suppose is closer to psychiatry than anything else around here. I bet, she said with a smile. We should have a coffee sometime. Sure. Let's go eat some more food. Most of the dining hall was empty, but I walked back and forth carefully, checking for Etienne. Etienne wasn't there, but the man from the roof was. He waved me over and introduced me to several of his colleagues. I was beginning to realize that my ignorance made me non-threatening. Most of the denizens of Number 5's paranoid world were protecting their secrets from the others. Since I didn't belong, they could talk to me more easily. It was a very useful position for me to be in, if I could make sense of what I was told. After excusing myself, I let Moti know to transcribe every conversation I had so I could read and reread them afterwards. Etienne was in our room, but I started to wonder where I was. I told him what I'd learned. I'm glad this place is proving interesting, he said. Shall we visit the Etherites now, or do you think it's not worth it? Let's give them a try. I mean, we know them, right? We went up to the 30th floor and started looking for Dr. Wong. Someone shouted us in French, and we turned to see Susan, the Etherite woman who packed her in gunshot wound, herself, beaming with delight. Dr. Wong said you were here. I've never seen you look so well, I told her. Oh, go on with you, she said. I'm just glad to be alive. Shall I show you around? Please, I said. Eventually, we found Dr. Wong having tea with several others in an oversized kitchen. Don't you think it's a bit weird that Etienne doesn't ask how we know them? Because we didn't tell him about them? He introduced us to the others and sat down to chat with them. Unfortunately, none of what they said made sense. Forgive me, said Dr. Wong. I'm afraid we're boring you. Not at all, I said, or at least not boring, but confusing. Can you explain what you're talking about? We're talking about ether, of course, Dr. Wong immediately answered. I was there when Lewis told you about it, remember? I nodded, remembering. He'd used a particular term, resonance, to describe the invisible substance which supposedly affected people's thoughts. Suddenly, I wondered how he was doing. Is Lewis... Dr. Wong shook his head, frowning. I haven't seen Lewis or Lucky since we were separated in Flying Falls. I didn't want to consider what that meant, so I simply nodded. The tricky part is measuring something like ether, said a slender woman with a British accent. Sometimes it feels closer to a philosophy than science. Dr. Wong sucked in a sharp breath. But it is science, he asserted firmly. We just don't know enough yet to do anything useful with what we have. All right, I said. I understood that much. Thank you. Shall we turn in? Asked Etienne. I have an idea. I don't, but I'm going to say I do. Having seen the rampant paranoia of Number 5 and some of its overly complicated secrets, I felt it was well worth examining the room with the cog drawing once more. Etienne agreed, and we searched the room minutely, looking for secret panels, symbols, or anything that might be useful. We didn't find anything. We ended up sitting side by side against the wall, talking about the people we'd met and how best to connect our small pieces of knowledge together. I took out Sol's diary and we took turns holding it, as if it would help us get inside. The light faded, but we were comfortable, so we continued chatting in the dark, remembering Professor Sol. Then the door opened and half a dozen people filed inside, speaking in whispers and leaving the light off. Stay silent and see what happens, obviously. I put a hand on Etienne's arm and neither of us moved or spoke. People coming in closed the door behind them but left the lights off. What news? Said a woman's voice. Ariel's been taken, said a man. She knew it was coming, so she made sure to cut all ties with us some weeks ago. I kept an eye on the local news, rather than using an informant. Several people in the group sighed in a mixture of relief and sadness. Ariel will sacrifice herself for us, said the woman. Perhaps she should have been the one to die, said the man. We'll never know, said the woman. All we know for certain is that we failed again. How are things in Rome? The man asked. Wait, did you hear that? I lit my torch and greeted the startled group, doing my best imitation of a person who was still groggy from being woken up. Hello? What are you doing in our room? Blinking in the sudden light, I saw half a dozen people, a mixture of Japanese people, Caucasians, Africans, and others. They stared back at Etienne and I. Konnichiwa, I said? One of the women laughed. Please speak English, your accent is terrible. Etienne and I stood and introduced ourselves through yawns. I noticed several of the people either wore or held wooden cogs on their person. So this is a meeting place. We have a wooden cog. Tell them you're interested in their wooden cogs. I showed Professor Sol's cog to the others. This belonged to my friend and employee, Professor Sol, before he was murdered. How much do you know? The woman asked me, giving the cog a cursory glance. Not much, but I'll share what I have. Go on, said the woman. I'll trade knowledge with you. We have something better than knowledge, I said. Access. She raised an eyebrow. To the forbidden floors. When I noticed, she smiled. Alright, she agreed. Will you take us there now? Happily, I said, if you tell me something useful before we go. She smiled delightedly. What's your subject? Same as everyone, I said, the sun outage events. Why are they happening, and how can we make them stop? She let out a breath. I wish I could answer those questions. I can at least tell you one thing. Long ago, there were other sun outage incidents. How long ago? I demanded. And how do you know? She shrugged elegantly, and it was my turn to share. Etienne and I led them away from the cog room, all the way to the sleeping quarters we'd been offered. I reminded myself silently that the rules didn't say we weren't allowed to invite more people in once we were accepted. As we drew closer, we heard muffled voices and saw light leaking from another room on the same floor. I wonder who's entertaining at this hour, Etienne said. We saw the thin light of the torch in the next room next to the conversation as it flashed briefly under the door. Did you see that? I asked Etienne. Someone else is listening in. How unspeakably rude, he said dryly. Let's investigate the eavesdropper. I crouched at the eavesdropper's closed door and strained to hear anything over the yelling in the better-lit room. There was a voice speaking inside, but I couldn't even tell if they were speaking Japanese, English, or something else. Moti, can you hear them? Yes, teacher. Shall I translate and transcribe for you? Please do. She says the astronomy department's head is infuriated by today's CNN interview, since the geology department remains at odds with their conclusions. What language is she speaking? I asked. French. Now she's recommending stealing primary data to rerun simulations. Thank you, Moti. Keep listening. Did you hear anything else, Moti? The eavesdroppers are approaching your door. Take a photo. Before I could say a word, both doors flew open at once and a furious scientist ran right into the eavesdropper, sending them both into the carpet in a tangled heap. Moti, I gasped. Take photos of them. Yes, teacher. I angled Moti's face to the impromptu wrestle and widened my eyes, hoping I was improving the view of what Moti saw through my contact lenses. In a flash, the eavesdropper had struggled free and run away. I was confident I had some excellent shots of the back of her head. Oh, perfect. Who are you? Snarled the man she left behind. I heard yelling. Was that you? I heard yelling and so I... Yeah, right. He cut me off and stormed away. The door remained open and the people left inside were staring at me. If I fled, I'd look even more guilty than I already did. What just happened? The man before me was a total stranger, although he was wearing a tie with Marvin the Martian on it, which I thought might be an astronomy in-joke. Hello, I said. Oh, he said. He opened the door, unperturbed that I had company. You're that, person. The funding person, I said. Yes. He shrugged off the awkwardness. What can I do for you? Show the photo of the eavesdropper? The man let us in at once, evidently not seeing me or anyone with me as a threat. I showed him the series of photos Moti had taken as the eavesdropper fled. I saw his eyebrows lift in recognition before he shrugged and stepped away. Ask about the eavesdropper? Are you going to tell me who she was? I asked. Nope. As I read Moti's screen, our cog-bearing companions decided that they'd had enough and left. I'll discuss it with the matron then. Go ahead and save us from our eavesdropper. I will, I said. Etienne drew me away and we went back to our room, mutually agreeing to decide on our next move after we got some sleep. The next morning we headed to breakfast together, and I was just starting to wake up when Etienne stiffened. "To look now," he said, "but isn't that our eavesdropper?" When I could look without being completely obvious, I saw he was right. Our eavesdropper sat in the middle of a large and international group only a few tables away. Pull up a chair and sit next to her. "Oh," she said, around a mouthful of pancakes, "you found me, good." "Is it?" I asked. Etienne hovered behind me in a delightfully menacing fashion. She swallowed, took a long drink of juice, and smiled, speaking in perfect English. "My name is Dr. Marigold, part of the sociologist crew here." I remained silent, waiting for more. "We're studying this unique environment," she said happily, giving a general wave that encompassed her table full of companions, and then the building as a whole. "So you weren't eavesdropping last night," I said, "but gathering data?" She nodded and took another mouthful of pancakes. "Does Matron know about this?" I asked. "Of course. We have another whole team over in Jakarta with that Indonesian guy, Petrus." "Petrus," I echoed faintly. Super rich, super brilliant, super generous. He's offering sanctuary to a bunch of people, not just scientists, but also people who have lost their homes to the volcanoes and flooding over in Bali. Etienne sighed and pulled up a chair. She gave him an openly appreciative look, and it was my turn to sigh. "This enclosed environment is absolutely fascinating," Dr. Marigold went on. "It's created by the brightest and wealthiest and most paranoid minds in Japan, and it's turned everyone into a bit nuts. There are a few exceptions, of course, Mickey being the most obvious. She's head of geology." "What's different about her?" I asked. "She's like Petrus," Dr. Marigold said, "just choosing not to react to the danger. She shares everything she knows freely, gives out passcodes willy-nilly, and is doing her best to be friends with everyone. And I bet she's gaining plenty of knowledge in return." "I bet you're gaining plenty of knowledge with your studies as well," I said. "Yep," she admitted cheerfully. I like her. Knowledge. I was starting to get an idea of what the true currency of this place was. We stepped away from Dr. Marigold's table. "What now?" Etienne asked in a whisper. "Let's look for Mickey and see what she knows, yeah." Mickey was also at breakfast, and sitting with a group that was self-consciously mixing disciplines in a show of unity. She agreed to chat with us in private. We made ourselves as comfortable as possible, around the two-person table in the living quarters Etienne and I shared. Taking a deep breath, we began by recapping all the different groups we'd met in the building as she filled in any that we'd missed. I ticked them off on my fingers. Your geologists say that Earth is fundamentally unchanged, and the Etherites are obsessed with the idea that ether is real. Which I would dismiss as nonsense, except my father clearly thought that the group had value, said Etienne. Agreed, I said, and the cog people too. They seem to be obsessed by history and death, and the astronomers are presumably enjoying more relevance than they've had since the 60s. Have I missed anyone? The 100th Day group, said Etienne, who are also death-obsessed, but whose primary goal seems to be to eliminate brilliant scientists. I hadn't heard of these cog people, said Mickey. Are they historians then? Not really sure, I admitted, but I do know they claim that the sun has gone out before, and it was brought back through human intervention. But that's wonderful, said Mickey. Why isn't that on the news? I winced. No one remembers how the sun was brought back. Oh, she said, thinking through the implications. Oh dear. Yes, I said. No, she said, that's still extremely helpful if true. Clearly, the previous sun outage event happened in prehistoric times. Therefore, whatever saved the planet then was not some highly technological solution, but something else. Her face dropped. Oh no. Oh no, what? I said. What if the solution isn't scientific at all? She said. What if it's one of the oldest religions that was ever the one true religion and we lost it? What if there is a god and he is really is dead? I stared at her in speechless horror, thinking of the tourists snapping pictures inside the sun god's temple in Peru. She shook herself. No, that's nonsense. I'm sticking to my theory that it's all an elaborate practical joke. Goodness knows our world has plenty of stupid, selfish, megalomaniac billionaires. I blinked at the shift of gears. Are you saying politicians like Ronald Clump are to blame for the whole thing? Yes, she said, a little too firmly. You see, the Earth hasn't changed, but the moon has. When the sun is out, the stars are altered too. It's simple. Is it? I said doubtfully. All you need is a number of giant contraptions that can unfold over the Earth close enough to block out the sky. I imagine these false constellations were actually weaknesses in those devices that allow light through. But they'd have to be enormous, I said. She shrugged dismissively. The human ego can accomplish anything. And there's an American election approaching, isn't there? Do you really think anyone could do that? And why? She shrugged, unconcerned. I could see she wanted to return to her work, so I let her go. Before long, we were at lunch at the communal dining hall once more, and the two leaders of the COG group came to sat with us. The taller woman had oversized glasses and a fringe that looked like it had been measured with a ruler. Her companion was slight and balding. The entire base, the non-scientists, looked the most like scientists. The woman introduced herself as Vivian, and her second-in-command as Justin. She sat down with her tray and began to eat while he remained standing. Etienne and I turned to look at each other. I wondered what the COG group wanted. Sit down. Etienne shook the hands of one after the other, and then it was my turn. Vivian gave me a slight smile to match her cool hand. Justin, however, dropped my hand as if it had burned him and exclaimed, "You're worthy. You're the one." "Justin," Vivian snapped, "sit down and shut up." He obeyed her at once, but without taking his eyes off mine. After a few minutes of eating in awkward silence, Vivian lowered her voice and spoke with deadly urgency. "My associate has an unusual ability. Because of that ability, he is the single most important person in our entire society." "Okay," I said neutrally, trying to ignore the urge to flee. "Justin is a finder. His purpose is to find people who are different, special. Worthy, if you like." I chose not to speak. From Etienne's audible gulp next to me, I imagined he was thinking the same thing I was. These people were clinically insane. "People like you," she said urgently. "Now that we've found you, there is hope." "What exactly do you want from me?" I asked, keeping a sharp eye on Justin, in case he tried to touch me again. Vivian gave Justin a cutting glance and raised her hands to Etienne and I in a gesture of peace. "Can we do some tests on you? Perhaps a blood test. Nothing invasive or harmful." "What?" Etienne said suddenly, looking puzzled and horrified in equal measure. "That's it, we're leaving." He stopped when he turned to me. "Wait, you're not actually considering this, are you?" he whispered. Was I? I couldn't deny I was curious about the COG people. We knew almost nothing about them, but could I trust them enough to do this? Alright, we're going to wrap this one up here, and in the next one we're going to make our decision. I think we're going to have to hang with the COG people. It looks like Etienne's dad, or Professor Sol, was part of it. So there must be some validity to it, just like the Aetherites. I guess we'll find out. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.